June 1st, 1926, Los Angeles, California. A girl is born at Los Angeles County Hospital to a mother who is already losing her mind and a father whose name will never be written on any document. The birth certificate lists the child's name as Norma Jeane Mortenson. The father's line is left blank. She will spend the rest of her life trying to fill that blank. Norma Jeane Mortenson will become the most photographed woman in the history of the world. Her face will appear on more posters, more magazine covers, more walls in more countries than any other female image ever produced. She will become a symbol of beauty so complete and so permanent that 70 years after her death, her image is still being reproduced daily on every continent on Earth. She will also spend her entire childhood being passed between strangers who did not particularly want her. She will sleep in 12 different homes before she is old enough to drive. She will grow up understanding, with the terrible clarity that abandoned children develop, that love is not something that stays, that the people who are supposed to protect you leave, and the ones who remain are not always safe, and that the only currency that reliably produces warmth and attention and the feeling of being wanted is the one thing she was born with and could not control: her beauty. The thing the world would love her for. The thing that saved her and trapped her and followed her all the way to a house in Brentwood, California on the night of August 4th, 1962, when she was 36 years old. And finally, permanently out of ways to outrun what had been chasing her since before she was old enough to name it. This is episode 1, before the blonde hair and the white dress and the breathless voice and the image that changed everything. This is Norma Jeane, the girl nobody wanted, who decided somewhere in the long silence of her abandoned childhood that the world was going to want her. She was right, and it destroyed her. To understand Marilyn Monroe, you have to begin with Gladys Baker, because Gladys Baker is the whole of it, or at least the beginning of the whole of it. The original wound, the first abandonment, the source of the current that ran through everything that followed. Gladys Baker was 24 years old when Norma Jeane was born. She was a film negative cutter at RKO Studios, a practical, skilled job in the industry that would later consume her daughter's entire life. She was also deeply, increasingly unstable. She had been married twice before, had 2 children she had already lost custody of, and was raising Norma Jeane largely alone in a Los Angeles that had no reliable safety net for struggling single mothers and no particular interest in acquiring one. She loved Norma Jeane. That is important to say clearly, because the story of Gladys Baker is easy to flatten into simple villainy, and she does not deserve that. She loved her daughter. She simply could not sustain it. The illness that had been building in her for years, a hereditary mental instability that had already taken her mother and her grandfather, was progressing, and a woman who is losing her grip on reality cannot adequately care for a small child, no matter how much she wants to. Within the first weeks of Norma Jeane's life, Gladys made the decision to place her with a foster family. The Bolenders, a religious, stable couple in Hawthorne, California, took the infant and raised her through her earliest years. Gladys paid them $5 a week from her salary and visited when she could. Norma Jeane called the Bolenders' mother Mama. She did not know for years which woman was her actual mother. When she was old enough to understand the distinction, the understanding did not come with comfort. What it came with was the first version of a question she would spend her entire life asking in different forms. Why am I not enough to make someone stay? The Bolenders were kind. They were devout. They ran a strict, quiet household where card playing was forbidden and movies were sinful and the emotional temperature was controlled and cool. Norma Jeane was fed and clothed and physically safe. She was not, in any sense that reached the deeper places, loved in the way she needed to be loved. She needed warmth. She needed abandon. She needed the specific, irrational love of a parent who thinks their child is the most remarkable thing in the world for no particular reason. The love that does not require the child to earn it or perform for it or be careful around it. She did not get that from the Bolenders. She was working for affection from the age she was old enough to understand that affection was available. And she was good at it. She smiled, she performed. She learned very early that certain expressions, certain behaviors, certain ways of presenting herself produced warmth from the adults around her. She filed that knowledge away. She would use it for the rest of her life. In 1933, when Norma Jeane was 7 years old, Gladys Baker did something that she had been saving her salary for 2 years to do. She bought a house, a small white house in Hollywood, close to the studios where she worked, and she brought her daughter home. For the first time in her life, Norma Jeane lived with her mother. For the first time, the woman she had been told was her real mother was present every day, eating at the same table, sleeping under the same roof, available in the morning and in the evening and on weekends. It was, by every account of the people who observed it, a genuine happiness for both of them. Gladys was a conscientious mother when she was well. She took Norma Jeane to the beach. She brought her to the studio sometimes and let her watch the enormous machinery of filmmaking from the edges. It lasted 18 months. In January 1935, Gladys Baker had a complete mental breakdown. She was institutionalized at Norwalk State Hospital, where she would spend most of the rest of her life. The White House in Hollywood was gone. The table they had eaten at together was gone. The beach trips and the studio visits and the 18 months of something that had felt for the first time like a real family. All of it gone. Norma Jeane was 8 years old. She was told, in the careful language adults use with children when they do not want to say the real thing, that her mother was sick and would get better. She was told not to worry. She was placed back into the foster care system and moved from the Belenders, who could no longer take her, to a series of homes that became, in her memory, a blur of different kitchens and different rules and different beds that were never quite hers. She visited her mother occasionally. Gladys would sometimes recognize her. Sometimes she would not. Sometimes she would be sitting in a chair staring at something that no one else could see, unreachable, as absent in her presence as she had been across the years of physical distance. Norma Jeane stood at the edge of those visits and understood something that no child should have to understand so young, that she was not enough to bring someone back, that love, even real love, was not sufficient protection against loss. That the people you needed most were capable of disappearing even when they were standing right in front of you. She carried that knowledge with her for the rest of her life. You can see it in every performance she ever gave. The hunger for connection underneath the surface of everything. The reaching that never quite stops. The eyes that are always looking for something just past the frame. What followed the institutionalization of Gladys Baker was a childhood that Marilyn Monroe would later describe with a precision and a controlled pain that told you everything about how many times she had gone over it in her own mind. 12 foster homes, some kind, some cold, one dangerous. She never fully described the abuse that occurred in one of those placements. She referred to it obliquely in interviews, in therapy, in the private journals she kept throughout her adult life. What she said, across different contexts and different years, was consistent in its outline. A trusted adult, a child, alone, a violation of the safety that children are owed absolutely and unconditionally. She said it happened. She said it shaped her. She did not say more than that publicly, and the specific dignity of her restraint on this subject deserves to be honored. What it added to the architecture of her inner life was another layer of the same fundamental lesson. You cannot trust the people who are supposed to protect you. Safety is not guaranteed by proximity. Being small and dependent and in someone's care does not mean you are safe. In between the foster homes, there was a period in the Los Angeles orphans' home. This detail stopped people when Marilyn mentioned it later, because the obvious question was, if her mother was alive, why was she in an orphanage? And the answer to that question is one of the most quietly devastating facts of her childhood. She was not an orphan. Her mother was institutionalized, not dead. There was a guardian, a family friend named Grace McKee, who genuinely cared about Norma Jeane, but was unable, for a period, to care for her directly. And so she ended up in the orphanage, not because she had no family, because the family she had could not hold itself together around her. She washed dishes there to earn her keep. She was 11 years old. Later in life, when she was the most famous woman in the world, Marilyn Monroe would drive past the Los Angeles orphans' home occasionally. She never said why. She never needed to. The door out of the foster care system when it appeared, was not education or talent or any of the conventional routes by which young people escape difficult circumstances. It was marriage. In 1942, Norma Jeane was 16 years old. Her guardian, Grace McKee, was about to move out of state with her husband, which would have sent Norma Jeane back into the foster care system, potentially back to the orphanage. Grace had a neighbor named Jim Dougherty, a 21-year-old man who was friendly and stable and willing. Grace arranged the introduction. The relationship progressed. In June 1942, Norma Jeane Mortenson married Jim Dougherty in a ceremony that she would later describe without romance or bitterness, simply as what it was: a transaction, a way out. The only door available to a 16-year-old girl with no money, no family, and no other options. Dougherty was not a bad man. He was kind to her, by most accounts, and genuinely fond of her. He wanted a conventional wife in a conventional marriage, dinners at a regular time, a tidy house, a woman who was present and uncomplicated and grateful. Norma Jeane tried. She cooked. She cleaned. She performed the role of young wife with the same disciplined attention she brought to every performance. But she was performing. She knew she was performing. And underneath the performance, something was building that no amount of dinner preparation could contain, an ambition so large and so urgent that she herself could not yet fully see its shape, only feel its pressure. Jim Dougherty shipped out to the Pacific in 1944. Norma Jeane was alone again in a small house in Van Nuys, working in a munitions factory to support herself, with nothing but time and the particular restlessness of a young woman who knows that her life is supposed to be something more than this, but cannot yet see how to get there. And then a photographer walked into the factory, and he pointed his camera at Norma Jeane Mortenson. And he saw something in the viewfinder that made him stop, and everything changed. His name was David Conover. He was a military photographer assigned to document women working in wartime production facilities, a morale project. Ordinary work, the kind of assignment that produces useful photographs and nothing remarkable. He photographed dozens of women at the factory that day. He photographed Norma Jeane last. And something happened when he looked through the viewfinder at this 18-year-old girl in her work clothes that made him put down his standard assignment and start shooting something else entirely. She understood the camera. That was the thing he noted afterward, the thing he kept coming back to when he described what he had seen. Not that she was beautiful, though she was. Not that she posed well, though she did. Something more fundamental than either of those things. She understood what the camera was and what it needed and how to give it exactly that instinctively without instruction, as naturally as breathing. Most people, when a camera is pointed at them, contract slightly. They become a slightly smaller, slightly more guarded version of themselves. They protect. Norma Jeane did the opposite. When the lens found her, she opened. She became more herself, not less. The camera's attention did not make her self-conscious. It made her free. For the first time in her life, being seen felt like safety rather than exposure. Conover came back. He brought other photographers. He referred her to the Blue Book modeling agency, where she was immediately signed. The modeling career that followed over the next 2 years was the chrysalis, the transitional space between Norma Jeane and Marilyn, between the girl who had survived the foster care system and the woman who was going to invent herself from scratch into the most recognizable image in the world. She was 18 years old. She had never been wanted by anyone for long. And now, finally, she had found the one place in the world where want was unconditional and immediate and required nothing from her except to be exactly what she already was. She filed for divorce from Jim Dougherty in 1946. He was still in the Pacific. She did not wait for him to come home to do it. She was already gone. Norma Jeane Mortenson had survived the thing that breaks most people before they are old enough to understand they are being broken. She had survived the mother who could not stay and the father who was never there, and the 12 homes and the orphanage and the marriage. That was an escape route. And the years of being moved from room to room in other people's houses, being careful, being quiet, being grateful enough and small enough to stay. She had survived all of it. And she had arrived at 18 years old with one extraordinary, accidental, completely natural gift: the ability to look into a camera lens and make every person on the other side feel, for a moment, like the most important person in the room. She did not yet know what she was going to build with it. She did not yet know the name she was going to give herself, or the color she was going to dye her hair, or the voice she was going to construct, or the walk that was going to stop traffic in every city on Earth. But Norma Jeane Mortenson knew one thing with complete certainty. Standing in that munitions factory with David Conover's camera pointed at her face, she was going to be seen, not passed along, not managed, not tolerated until a more convenient arrangement presented itself. Seen, fully, permanently, by the whole world. She was going to make sure of it. Think about what Norma Jeane had already survived by the time she was 18 years old. A mother taken away when she was 7, a father whose name no one would write down, 12 different homes, 12 different sets of rules, 12 different kitchens where she was a guest at best and an inconvenience at worst. An orphanage where she washed dishes to justify her presence despite the fact that her mother was alive and simply unable to hold herself together around her. One home where something happened that she never fully described but never stopped carrying. A marriage at 16 that was not a choice but a calculation, the only exit available to a girl with no money, no family, and no one whose job it was to fight for her. She was 18 years old. She had never in her life been anybody's first priority. And yet, she had not become hard. That is the thing that is most remarkable about Norma Jeane when you look at what the first 18 years of her life actually contained. The hardness would have been understandable, even reasonable. The natural defensive response of a person who has been taught repeatedly and specifically that love is temporary and safety is an illusion, and the people who are supposed to stay will leave. She had every reason to close, to protect, to build the kind of walls that abandoned children sometimes build that keep everything out, the bad and the good together, permanently. She did not do that. She remained somehow open, hungry for connection in a way that the years of disappointment had not yet managed to extinguish, still believing, against all available evidence, that someone somewhere was going to see her completely and stay, that she was worth staying for, that Norma Jeane, not a performance, not an image, not a carefully constructed version of herself designed to produce warmth in strangers, was enough. She was right about that. She was always right about that. The tragedy of everything that followed is not that she was wrong to believe it. The tragedy is that the world she walked into, the industry, the culture, the era, was not equipped to confirm it. It could make her famous. It could make her immortal. It could give her the whole world's attention for the rest of her life. It could not give her what Norma Jeane actually needed. Episode 2. How Norma Jeane built Marilyn Monroe from the ground up. The blonde, the voice, the walk, the name, and why it was the most brilliant and the most costly performance of her entire life. This is Legends of America.